as we start every lecture, whether it's online or in class, I'm going to ask you about a couple of things that happened in the last couple of days that you can tell me about and just get your opinions about it, right? Because we're starting to make sure that you have an idea of what's happening and a general knowledge about things. I think in about 2 weeks, I'm going to start chatting with you about your F3, and then you have a summative. So remember, what you've done so far was the F1 and the F2, which both counted 20% each, so that's 40%. The F3 will also count 20%. And then your S1, your summative, will count 40%. So that one is the biggest one. Okay, so the semester, 60% of your mark. So what we're starting with now is just chatting about producers. What I want you to do now is to think about someone you would love to put on air, a guest that you would put on air. And then tell me why. Why would you want to put that guest on air? So you're the producer for a major market radio show, and you have the opportunity to book anyone, okay, for any interview, your dream guest. You must also always have a plan B in case the guest cancels, because it does happen. So there should always be something else as a backup. So what you do is you have a worksheet like the one below with answers, okay? So you need to tell me who the guest is, who are they, why are they here, what have they done? Where do they live or come from? And then you need to have materials about the guest that you want to bring for us to look at, to talk about. So then you need to check with your presenter. Why do you check with your presenter? Because your presenter is the one who has to talk about this person on air, okay? So then you need to tell your presenter, why are you interested in having this specific person on air? So what piqued your interest in this person? So this is useful when you're trying to get a sense of what the host might like for future interviews, okay, for the show. What would you like to get from this guest when you want to interview them? Do you want them to be in studio, or should it be a phone interview, or should it be pre-recorded? How long would you like the piece to be? So obviously some of these kinds of interviews would be 5 minutes, some of them would be like half an hour or an hour. And then what is your plan B if this person drops you? Okay. There has been times where I've listened to the radio where you can hear, well, where they've punted that they should be having XYZ on air, and then said person cancels. Then it's like they don't really know what to do, or they don't have anyone else. So they just do like a, whatever, like a fluff piece of anything that's happening on air at the moment. So there's a lot of work that goes into it. When you think about a producer, what comes to mind? What do you think a producer does? So if we start looking at these, what we're looking at now is on page 149 in Beyond Powerful Radio. Okay, so Valerie Geller's book. It's producers facing the blank page there. So producing is a tough gig. When you start at a radio station, let's say you start at a campus or a community radio station, you will be your own producer, which is a great idea because you need to learn how to be able to do all of these things. So you need to know what goes into it and what it takes behind the scenes. And it is a tough gig, okay? The problem is when the show goes well, the host gets the credit, okay? So it's the same as, like you mentioned now, the black coffees, etc. The people that are really good or well known, you know them. You don't know the team behind them, helping them, pushing them to greater successes. Same with the producer. Every now and then you get a team that where the producer and the host is extremely close and they'll talk to each other on air. But most of the times we don't know who the producers are, okay? But if there's something that goes wrong on the show, the producer will be blamed. Let's say, for instance, the winner isn't on air when they should be, or you were talking to a politician and the call line cut out from your side, or you went off air for some reason, or the wrong song was played, or the wrong ad was played, etc. Okay. So good producer jobs are difficult to get. Unfortunately, this industry is quite small. And there are only so many producer opportunities, depending on which line of producing you want to be in. Also, it's long hours, long stressful hours, but a lot of people love it. Like I love doing production work. And it's a skill set that you can be taught. It's not one that you have to be born with. You can be taught how to be a great producer, okay? So although many of the DJs and presenters do produce their own shows and talk radio shows, a producer can add significantly to the success of a program. A lot of radio station program managers started out as producers on radio stations. Quite a few commercial radio stations currently have people in management who used to be producers, and they even have KFM has a station manager who used to be the producer of their breakfast show. So there are spaces to move from production into management if that's something you want to do one day. Producers are an extra additional cost to a radio station, okay? So they can't afford to put an extra person on every single show. So how do you think they determine where to put producers?
Like, ma'am, the show with the most numbers would have a producer.
Why?
Because that's where the listeners are at. So it needs more prep and polish. It's our golden baby.
So Breakfast and Drive will have a producer, and sometimes there might be other shows that will have, but mostly it'll be Breakfast and Drive, depending on the station and how much extra money they have. Okay. So the rest of the shows tend to do their own production. So I don't know who of you listened to Metro, but they just moved stations. So they're doing their show this morning from a different, studio. So they were chatting about how all over the place things are still, and they don't know where everything is and what to do and what not to do. So it was quite interesting hearing it from their perspective as well, just from being inside a new studio. How do you find the right producer? Do you think you can just hire anyone to be on a breakfast show? Or do you think their personality would be important here?
I don't necessarily think that anyone can just be hired, especially via qualifications. I think in this industry, experience talks more than what you've actually qualified for and all that. So the main focus would be getting someone who has done that job for a couple of years even.
Let's say it's the Drive show. Oh, well, actually, no, let's take your example. So someone who has been on air for a few years, fine, have done it for a few years, great. Do you think that if that person has a very soft and sensitive personality and the host is extremely forward and is known to lash out and is a difficult person, do you think that they will work together?
No, not at all.
No.
So when it comes to a producer, as much as what you've done is important, it's also about your personality, okay? Because you need to get along with the host, the co-host, or the host of the show. They need to be able to have a good relationship together, the producer and the host, okay? Because the producer and the host need to be able to listen to each other, so they need to be able to respect each other. And both of them need to have the same goals for the show. So yes, as much as great, you need to have experience, not just necessarily your degree, whatever. Here it is about your personalities as well, because you end up spending a lot of time together. We always say it's kind of like a marriage. This is literally like your work husband or your work wife. It's someone that you spend a lot of time with. So the two of you need to get along extremely well. So how do you find the right producer? How do you find someone who will fit with you and on your specific show? What if this person is perfect for you? You think this person will do great on air, but this person's ambition is actually to be a presenter, not a producer. Now imagine you hire this person. Great. This person is good at their job. They're good at being a producer, but this isn't what they want to do. It's not their passion. What if they now start to either try to sabotage you as the host to try and get on air themselves, or try and push for airtime, or after you have now groomed this person, you've put in a lot of work, so 6 months down the line, they decide, this isn't for them. They want to be on air, so they quit because they got a radio job as an on-air presenter. we tend to tell people to be wary if someone wants to be a presenter themselves, because that just means they're settling for now until they can move that way, which is also fine. A lot of them want to be in talk radio, so not necessarily music radio, which means they're not a threat to you. But also be warned that a producer can make or break you, okay? Can make or break your show. That's why it's so important that you need to have a good producer that you have a good relationship with, because you can harm yourself also in the long run, or you can harm the station also. Yeah, so you need to be wary of that. And also a lot of the times, unfortunately, in commercial radio stations, they do tend to string you along. So they might say, cool, yeah, they'll give you a gig one day on air. And 5 years down the line, you still don't have something, or you're still on the midnight shift, because they don't really see you on air, but they think you're a good producer. So they're going to keep on with this for now. So you, in essence, want someone who doesn't want to be on air, who wants to be behind the scenes and help push and grow you. Okay. And there are a lot of people like that. Like, I've always been a behind the scenes person, not someone who wants to be in front of the cameras and pushing myself. Producer is someone who believes in your show, someone who believes in the station, someone who wants to make you and the product great. So someone who is passionate about the overall product. Okay. That doesn't necessarily mean that they always have to agree with the host point of view. Sometimes it's good to get a different point of view from the host point of view. The main factor here is that professionals can work with just about everyone. Okay, that's what it comes down to. If you are a professional in your job, you can work with pretty much anyone. So great producers, different from presenters, are not born, they are developed. So great producers are developed over time. You can be taught to be a great producer. Okay. Optimally, a good producer is a fit with the show and the host. So your personality needs to fit in with the show, and your personality needs to fit in with the host. If the host is a very difficult person, you need to be able to handle that and work with it. If the host is someone who is always right, you need to be able to manage that. So if you're hiring a producer, you are looking for someone who has a lot of potential and promise. It's the same with when you're hiring someone new, like in a junior position, wherever. You always look to see what promise they have, what potential they have, because you know that with time, you can get them to the level where you want them to be. So we see that a lot of radio stations hire very young people, especially in production roles. Sometimes in a commercial sphere, you can work really hard as a producer. Again, depending on what type of producer you want to be. But obviously, the more experience you gain, the better off you will be. Also, we get expert producers who we will put on like talk radio stations. And these guys might be experts in current affairs or politics or the financial sectors or whatever it might be. So you then specialize in that kind of a show, and that's what you do. The same with like music producers, obviously, and audio producers. When you're hiring this producer, look for potential and promise. Ask, is this person bright? Are they good at handling pressure? Pressure is a big one in radio, okay? There's a lot of pressure. Are they fearless? Can they cut off someone on air? Can they say no when they need to say no? And a lot of people struggle with that. If I ask you, because we're going to be doing call screening in the next class, so if I ask you whether you can say no to a very sweet 80-year-old lady who really, really, really just wants to go on air and just hear her voice once in her life, will you be able to say no if need be? So it's that kind of questions as well. Don't hire someone, like I said, who wants to be on air. It usually doesn't work out because they end up pursuing their dreams, which is obviously being on air, not behind the scenes. The job of a producer is more directing than acting. Okay, so that's kind of how you can see it. Successful producers who excel enjoy the behind the scenes aspect of making things happen. You enjoy everything that happens behind the scenes, getting the product to the end goal. Often the best producers tend to be listeners first, people who enjoy the show. So there are a few times where people have hired producers who were frequent listeners of a show. So they understand the show. They know the show very well. They enjoy the show's content. They have an idea of what might make it better because they were they are a listener, okay, an average listener of that station. Keep the good ones. So producers are often forced to go into TV or to leave the industry if they want to be paid what they're worth. So this comes to your question earlier about money. Again, like different salaries and things. But a lot of times it is a case of people are forced, especially the older you get and you have a family, you want to be stable. You might go to TV at the end of the day, unless your station values you, because something that radio stations are starting to focus on more is to value the producers that they have, the good ones that they have, and to pay them to stay, to keep them there instead of losing them, okay, which happens. So there are very little producer training or job security available. If you find a good producer, you do whatever it takes to keep him or her, because you know that there aren't a lot of these people around, especially content producers. If you are a great content producer, we would try to make it work to get you to rather stay than to go, because we know how scarce these people are to find good content producers. A good producer can contribute tremendously towards making your show powerful radio. Okay, they help a lot. A bad producer or an angry one can damage you. So make your producer feel valued. That's extremely important. Okay. Like I said, today's producers might be tomorrow's program directors. Okay, might be the program manager or even someday the station manager. You want to keep these people. We always seriously look at people who do the behind the scenes stuff if we're looking for new management roles. So it is one to keep in mind, okay? Then share the wealth. When you become a host, if you want to be a radio presenter, when you become the presenter, treat your producers nicely. Realize how much of the work is theirs. So I have a friend who used to be a producer for an afternoon drive show. He's now the program manager. So he's moved from production to program manager. And within his team, as much as he wasn't the host, he was kind of seen as the main man, as the boss, because whenever they did anything, he organized everything. He told everyone what their jobs were, what to do within all the scenarios, because he organized. So that also tends to happen, that dynamic within that. So as the host, you will get all the glory, whereas your producers might be underpaid. You will get the credit because you are on air, people hear your name, and they're the ones that get yelled at if anything goes wrong, okay? So it's important to realize, so share those freebies, and I have to tell you, they do. They're really good. Producers get just as much freebies as the hosts tend to get, okay? Because at the end, the producer is in essence the person who has the relationship with all of these people, because the producer is the one who talks, who's behind the scenes, organizing everything and talking and arranging with all the, whoever it is, PR people, etc. So you get a lot of freebies, which is quite cool. I miss the freebies so much, the amount of freebies that we used to get. Anyway, give them honest feedback. If you are a presenter with a new producer, give them honest feedback, okay? Because that's the only way someone will grow and will learn within what they're doing. And then avoid the manufactured hour. That means avoid stuff that's out there already. So avoid headlines, press releases, social media articles. The closer the show will sound to real life with genuine people having a real conversation, the better it works. We know this. If you won't be talking about something off air, why are you putting it on the show? Same thing. If you and your friends will not have a conversation about that topic off air, don't put it on air, because it's not going to work, okay? Listeners prefer programs that sounds as though the conversation could just as easily been taken off air. So the flow needs to be there. It needs to sound natural, never be boring. So I just want to mention on this, what I picked up in a lot of your recordings when I was listening to it was the fact that performance is lacking. A lot of them sounded like you were reading, which you probably were, off a paper. So I could hear that you prepped because you were reading this section on air. The problem is, if that was live, it won't work. So we need to work on your performances this semester, okay? You should be able to take whatever that was, record it without me hearing that you were reading the whole section. Know your source, extremely important. We are going to look at news as well this semester, and that will come in here as well, obviously. It's fine to use the internet and prep services and current events and news stories for content. But as a producer, you should also bring your own original stories and ideas to the program. Use real life scenarios for content, okay? So if something happened in your life, talk about that on air. So use that information. Let's say, for instance, let's say I was supposed to do gardening and I didn't, and I had someone, a spouse, who continuously nagged at me for doing the garden work or not doing the garden work when I said I will. How can I take that to air? I can bring the story and we can try and find a universal angle, and the universal angle around that would be, how often does your wife nag you about not doing your chores or about not mowing the grass when you said you will? And then from the other point of view, you could do it from, why is it that you always have to end up becoming a nagger when that's not who you were, because your husband or your spouse, whatever, doesn't want to do the chores that you want them to do, whatever. And there's like a whole thing behind this, there's a whole psychiatry thing behind it. Anyway, so the whole idea is you should be able to take whatever happened in your life, make it universal, and bring it to air as additional content, okay? Or even like something like, this weekend, I spoke to my daughter I phoned my daughter and she was in the shower taking the call. In my life, I would never have a phone with me in the shower. So have you ever can you imagine or envision a scenario where you would have your phone in the shower with you, where you would answer it? What are those scenarios? Let us know what scenarios those would be, for instance. So that would be another kind of a thing. So producers should have a very broad general knowledge. Or what is your take on nagging? Yes, and your experience with nagging to engage more with the listeners. Yeah. So that's like, you can have two angles there. You can have the angle from the nagger or the angle from the person being nagged at. So definitely, yes. Broad general knowledge. Listen to all the different radio stations. So you must listen to your competition, know what they're doing versus what you are doing, and generate ideas based on life. So like I've told you before, you need to experience things. So you need to go out. You can't just sit at home and go to school and that's it. Okay, you need to know more and experience more. It's easy to Google guests and to come up with names and sources, but we warned, the internet is not necessarily a reliable source of accurate information, and please do not use Wikipedia, okay? Fact check your sources. Find the legitimate sources before you take anything to air, because think about it quickly. If you hear a presenter talk about something, you assume that they know the content, right? You assume that what they are talking about is factual. Okay, we assume that radio presenters and newsreaders know what they're talking about, just like we assume newsreaders on TV know what they are talking about. So make sure that you do. Okay, don't take stuff to air that it might not be credible, that you have not fact checked. AKA, don't use Wikipedia once again. Don't undermine your credibility by presenting facts that you have not checked. So there are a couple of simple techniques that should bring several topics to the host that no one else will be able to cover in the same way. The first one is your life. Obviously, no one can cover your own life scenarios the same way you can, because no one will experience things the way you experience it. So bring an idea from your own life, something that's happened to you personally, something that you've overheard or observed. So something you've witnessed or you've heard about or directly overheard. So that's why I normally say go out and snoop. So go and sit in a coffee shop and listen to what it is that people are talking about. especially when talking about QAnon. Oh yes, QAnon, pretty hectic topic, so you can't just bring it up on air. No, you can't. In fact, even with the information I've given you, there were a lot of people who still had absolutely no idea what QAnon was. But hopefully now you would have an idea. But yes, so go sit in a restaurant. If you work for a youth radio station, then go and sit where youth hang out and listen to what it is they're talking about. If you work for a adult contemporary radio station, go to where that specific age bracket will hang out and the specific type of listener of your station will hang out, and go and sit and listen to what it is they're talking about. Are they complaining about their boyfriends not asking them to marry them? Are they complaining about the petrol price? What is it that they are talking about, right? So put yourself in their environments and find something to talk about. Or their news that you would talk about off air. So what are the stuff that you and your friends are talking about off air? What current affairs have you brought up? What did you speak about? Think about you now, this weekend that passed. What did you talk about this past weekend that was newsworthy? Like that would be the kind of stuff that you can bring on air. That's something you can take to air. Like for me personally, the Krugersdorp thing hit home for me. That was a big one. I still can't believe it. It's such a horrible story. So that's one I spoke about a lot off air this weekend, which means it's one that I would then bring to air to talk about because I have very strong opinions on that specific topic. So it's those kind of things, okay? Which is why I ask you what happened in the news today. Then use your life. Like I said, a producer helped to get his host the universal angle of a topic that came from the host's private life. Okay, so let's say you as the host had a story over the weekend and you would love to try and see if you can't do something with it on air. You bring it to your producer, you and the producer brainstorm it, and then you generate content. So in this example, the host had promised his wife that he would paint the garage because he preferred to watch football on Sundays. They got into a huge fight. He and his producer decided that the paint, the garage, and the argument were his private life. But there was a universal angle to work into the show. So the producer found a psychologist who have just published a study on male-female relationships. It seemed most men didn't care whether a woman gained weight or was a lousy cook, but what they hate was nagging. Okay, why? Because their mother nagged them. So the topic went on for 2 hours with a lot of humor. Okay, it took a talented producer though to help find the universal angle and to focus on it for air. So there you go. You see, nagging once again, sustainability and how it should be implemented more. Oh, this is a topic. Okay, I understand what you're saying. Yes. Okay, so this is something you would want to or would talk about definitely also. So can you start seeing how important the role of a producer is in the life of a host? Like a producer's role is quite important. They play quite an important role on the day-to-day with a host. Okay, this is why you have to focus on them because they work together. So they really do have like a husband, whatever, work husband, work wife relationship. Okay. You also want to make sure that you have someone who is very flexible, not rigid. So someone who will understand that a great show does not always stick to one topic or doesn't always only move from A to B. Sometimes a caller would come in that might take you in a completely different direction, but it will work so well on air that you need to be able to go that way as the content moves. Okay, so it's also important that you should be able to look at things like that to create those magic moments. So formatics are important. Once again, we know these formatics, and I think they've been drilled into your head so many times now that you should dream about formatics in your sleep by now. So it's important to have a producer who understands the logic behind formatics. Why do we have formatics?
to keep the form of the show.
Yes, that's part of it, definitely, because people are creatures of habit. So we want things to be like the way that we hear them. Why else?
Ma'am, I think it just gives the show order. Like there's order in the show.
It does give the show order. Yes. What else?
Ma'am, to avoid mistakes on air.
To avoid mistakes. Well, yeah, it'll also help because it helps with keeping the format. But the word I'm looking for is for recall. Remember that. Recall. Because,
Recall.
yes, that's why you keep saying the radio station's name and show's name and the host's name over and over and over for recall, so that you can remember what we said. You can't remember what you had for lunch last week, Wednesday. How are you going to remember what radio station you listened to? So recall. Okay. Anyway, so it's important that a producer understands the logic behind these formatics. Lots of producers know the basics, but they're never told why they matter so much. Why it's crucial to mention the station's name or the frequency before each caller goes to air, and to reset the topic every few minutes before and after commercial breaks. What does it mean when we reset a topic? What do we do when we reset?
Repeat the topic for someone who just joined in.
Yes. So imagine that two of you are standing talking and the third person just joins you. What are you going to do? You're going to turn to that person and say, oh, so we're just currently talking about XYZ. This is where we were, blah, blah, and carry on, right? Same thing. So you will take it from a different angle, yes. But you'll give a summary kind of what it is that you were talking about. If you have a person on the line, like an expert on the line, you will say this is the person that you were talking about, and you will reintroduce the show, right? So you're going to say your name again, the name of the show, the station, so all your thematic topics again. So that is resetting. Yeah, I'm glad to see that you remembered that one. Yes. So it's important to remember that we work with ratings that are all based on recall. Okay. We are working on numbers in terms of how much we can charge for our ads and things like that. So recall is important. Memory isn't reliable. If people don't remember what they had for breakfast, how are they going to remember what they listened to at 7:15 last Thursday morning? They won't. That's the problem. So recall. Staff need to understand the importance of helping the listener retain your station details by repeating them on air as often as possible. So that leads us to what is called Geller Media International's Producers 10 Commandments. So this you can find on page 158 of Valerie Geller's textbook. It starts with number 1, know the host or the presenter and his or her audience as well. So you should know as a producer who your presenter is, okay? Know them in detail. What are their likes, their dislikes? What kind of topics do they talk about? Why do they focus on that kind of topics? What are they experts in? Do they like humor? Are they more serious, etc., etc.? And know their audience. So you should know who will tune in at that specific time on that show. Why are they tuning in? What problem are you solving for the audience for them to tune in then? Then number 2, do not covet your host's air shift, but be a faithful listener to it. So don't try and take over the show. It's your host's show. It's not your show as the producer. You need to be a listener of your host's show. That's what you're trying to do. You are trying to produce the best version of the show that it can be for you as a listener. Okay. Never put a boring caller or a guest on air. Why? Because just you trying not to be rude, in essence, means that you are being rude to your listener because you are losing your listeners because of the content you're putting on air. That's boring. Okay, so don't put a boring caller or a guest on air. Make sure they have something to say before going to air. have only one director or program manager giving input. So sometimes what can happen is you might have your program manager saying one thing and the station manager saying something else. And then you're like, what now? Who do I listen to? Which one of the two, right? So make sure that you only get input from one of them, not from both of them. Because then you kind of have a bit of a clash of the titans going on.
In terms of community radio stations, do they even bother looking at like borrowing callers, or they just take whatever that comes in?
So if you don't know better, right, and you are used to not a lot of people phoning in and you see there's a call, what are you going to do? You're going to go, oh, someone is phoning me. Let's put them on air. Yay. And do that. You're not going to screen the call necessarily. But should you screen the call beforehand? Yes, you technically should screen the call before putting that person on air. So unfortunately, not everyone gets the type of training that you have here. Okay, so they don't know what you know. So you know that putting a caller on air should be part of your show prep. So it should be the same as you are prepping a feature for a show. Should be exactly like that. So just like you won't do a boring feature on air, you won't put a boring caller on air, because what are you doing? You're alienating your listeners. That person is simply thinking about themselves, going, yes, I have someone to talk about, thinking that it's going to be cool off air, or rather for me at home to listen to it, not taking into consideration that firstly, it's you're taking a risk because you're not in control of the situation if you simply put a caller live on air without having spoken to them off air. And you have no control over whether this person is interesting or boring. So, no, I don't think they think about it.
Okay, ma'am, another question, ma'am. Is the caller prepped before the actual phone call?
So
like
you prep yes, a little bit, because you're prepped in terms of asking what is it that you want to talk about on air? What are you phoning in to say?
But is that preparation happening like while the show is going on or before the show? So in that few little minutes, you prepping that caller before they call the show?
Yeah.
Okay.
Some of the stuff.
So they're wasting their airtime. Are they wasting their airtime? Are they using their airtime?
This is how good some producers are. Someone on air. Okay, let's take a talk radio here. You are on air talking about a topic, right? And then you say, cool, we're going to take your calls, but you continue as the host talking. Your calls, or someone is calling in, that's while you're talking on air. Your producer answers that call, decides to put it through or not. Then your producer signals you to say, listen, you have a caller for said person. You then take the call. Then while you're on this call, producer takes more calls on the other side and screens these calls so long and decides who to put on air and who not. You can wait for 40 minutes before you go on air, by the way. Or you can go on air directly. But anyway, then the producer puts that person through and you talk to the second person. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. So you as the caller need to have airtime, literally. Like you must have sufficient
airtime. It's not their fault if your airtime runs out.
Yeah, okay.
But it's their content at the end of the day, and what if it runs out just like?
If you have a good enough story, and I've taken your details and you've dropped off air, yes, I will phone you back. Have you should have heard that before, where they've spoken to someone and they've lost the call and then they're like, cool, we're just phoning this person back.
Okay.
Because there are people that have good stories, so then I will call you back. Okay. Also, something we get taught how to talk to people, because again, people don't know how to present. It's not their job. They are not media personalities. So what do we do as people when we want to reiterate a point? We say the same thing twice. So I'm going to give you my whole story, and then I'm going to say my story again. So we need to know, we get taught in such a way that we know you're going to repeat yourself. So when you're done telling your story, I say, cool, thank you, cheers. Cut you off right there. That's also something that community radio stations don't do because they don't know how. Right. So where were we now? Boring guests, and then program directors. Number 5, pay close attention to details. So your host or presenter will not have to. And remember your address list or database and keep it up to date. So when people enter a competition, for instance, you as the producer will be the one compiling all that data. Okay, you compile all the stats of the people. You compile the stats of the winners. Let's say there's a competition right now on air. 2 people are going live against each other. You take the winner details down to send further, etc., etc. You as the producer should have a call list with the restaurants in the area's numbers, the pool cleaners, the whatever, you should know who releases the press releases. You should have any single important detail that might be needed, or numbers or details, like comes from you, not the presenter. Okay, so you should be a very well organized person as a producer. So you should have a database that's updated and an address list that's updated, so that you know at all times who you are talking to. Or let's say, for instance, someone needs to go somewhere, then you can tell them what is the closest, for instance. Or if someone passes away right now and you need to interview someone, who can you contact to get an interview? So then you should know, okay, cool, I can phone this person and this person can give me the number for that person and that person I can interview, for instance. Okay, so it's all this kind of extra detail that you need to have. Then number 6 there, be organized, able to easily and quickly locate a contact, like we just said, and find the things your host or presenter put down and loses. Never throw away a phone number, an email address, a takeout menu. Don't throw away anything, okay? You keep everything and you log it, because you never know when you can need it. Then number 7 there, know the internet world and the real world and know the difference, okay? Read about and live in them both. What does that mean? Means know what is happening around the world. Know what's happening in South Africa. Know what is trending on Twitter. Know what the biggest TikTok video is that's going viral at the moment. But also experience real life and have things to talk about that takes real personal connections, talking to people, okay? Not AI, actual people. So that you can talk from both perspectives. Then number 8 there, have a life outside the radio station. It will serve you as a show prep 24 hours a day, every day, providing you with creative topics and angles nobody else is doing, okay? So again, think about your weekend right now. Think about something that happened this weekend that you can talk about on air. Perhaps you went to go see a movie old school style. So you went to a roadhouse and you sat in your car and watched a movie from there. Like, when last? Or have you ever even done that? Like the experience of that, for instance. Or perhaps, I don't know what you did. Like perhaps you went to a concert of some sorts or whatever, okay? The whole idea is just so that you can think about anything that happened. Or perhaps you had a fight with your sibling. That's very universal, okay? So perhaps that's an angle you can take. What is the biggest fight you've ever had with your brother or sister? Or have you ever been in such a bad fight that you broke something in the house while fighting or whatever it is? So that kind of stuff. Then number 9, study the station and learn to do everything. Please, this is super important. You should, I know they always say jack of all trades, master of none. In this aspect, you want to be a jack of all trades. You want to be able to know how everything works, okay? You want to be able to be the producer who can run the board, edit, and assemble the audio yourself, set up a remote, screen the calls, make the coffee, plan the events or travel or whatever. Do absolutely everything. You want to be able to know how everything works. And then foster good relations between your host or show and the rest of the radio station, especially the news and the sales department. Why? Because you will always have news coming in okay, during your show, like at the end of the hour. So I don't know if you've realized or seen, but that bantering between the news presenter and the actual presenter on air, like it creates such good content sometimes. So gone are the days where we separate the two completely. The synergy from bringing in the two of them together it's kind of is what all the what's the word I'm looking for? The really good radio stations are doing these days. It really is what they're doing now. They are having people talk to each other instead of having this separation between newscast and the presenters, right? Anyway, so I have a good relationship with them. I have a good relationship with the sales department because they are the ones who run the ads and the competitions and things on your show, and that's where your money comes from. So you want to have a good relationship with them so that if you don't understand something, you can just simply go to them and have them explain it to you better, whatever it is, because you can't screw up on air when it comes to sales, right? Then you also want to have a good relationship with all the other shows, because you want to know what's happening on the rest of the station during a day. It's also good sometimes to punt other things. Remember, like, you're all on the same team. You're not competing against each other. So if someone else is doing something cool, then mention it. Okay, you want to mention on air that they are doing something that's really cool. So that's overall what we're looking at right now in terms of producers. Okay, so producing is a tough gig, but it can be extremely rewarding at the end of the day. So if we look at a summary, understanding the role of a producer and understanding the lack of recognition and remuneration that often goes into the job is quite important. But again, these days, the stations are trying to keep the producers instead of losing them, because we've realized how few really good producers there are. We want to keep those good content producers. So we should be paying you what you are worth. Okay. And also, again, think about the fact that you can move from there into a management role. Find the right producer. Finding the right producer, rather, to radio is like finding the right spouse to a relationship. It must be a good match, or there will be a radio divorce. And you want to avoid that. Okay. Then number 3 there, great producers can be developed just as great talent can. So you can develop a great producer. All you look for is great promise and potential. Okay. If someone has the promise and the potential, you can train them to do the rest. Number 4, if you have a good one, do what is necessary to keep them. Number 5, give a new producer a trial run before hiring them. So that's important, because sometimes we make demos and things that don't really portray who we are or how we are. So it's a good thing. It's a good idea to give someone a trial run before you hire them so that you can see whether they are actually living up to your expectation of them. Then number 6 there, good judgment and awareness. Okay, I thought someone was going to talk now. Good judgment and awareness of the medium and flexibility are all good qualities of a producer. You need to be able to have good judgment, obviously, in terms of what you're doing and putting on air, etc. And you need to have an awareness of how radio works and flexibility in terms of if you were going in a certain direction with the topic, but the topic now seems to be leaning towards the complete opposite side, but it will work really well if done correctly, you should be able to go with it. Number 7, refer to chapter 2, generator-reactor pairings. The same rule applies to morning show hosts and producers and afternoon show hosts and producers. So what did we always say? What did we say there? We want a generator and a reactor to work together. So we don't want a host that's a reactor and a producer who's a reactor, because then I'm going to have a very boring show. Okay, they need to balance each other out. So we do need a generator and a reactor. If they are both generators, it's not a train smash because the producer will not be going on air, but it's still not ideal. Okay, so you do want to look for generator reactor combinations, unless it's like a show that has a few people on it, like for instance a breakfast or a drive, where you can have more than one generator and reactor on the show. Then number 8 there, a cautionary word about the internet as a source. It's not always reliable. We know that. Hashtag Wikipedia. Number 9 there, the universal angle of the topic comes from the host's own live. Remember that? So you should be able to understand that anything that you do in real life should be able to be turned into a universal angle. Okay, so universal angle of a topic comes from the host's own live. Okay, any questions for me here with regards to
Yes, ma'am. Regarding the fifth point, whereby a producer before it when the producer is given a trial run.
Yeah.
What kind of trial runs are they given? Are they based on like practical application or like under pressure kind of scenarios and see what will they do? Or...
So it's kind of, we just like get you to come and produce a show. It's to see whether you and the host can also get along, whether your personalities work, and just to see whether you actually do know something and that you didn't just say that you know things and then in essence you don't.
Oh, okay, cool.
Okay.
So are they given for that one show, or are they given a certain period of time? Oh, okay.
It'll depend completely on the radio station. Some of them don't even do that. So some of them will just hire you, obviously, if they know you from somewhere or if they've spoken to someone who do it. Others, especially if you're still learning, might make you do like a month of producing a certain show before you move to that actual daytime show. Or they might, normally they'll do something like that as well. So they'll put you on another show, like to train for like a month before moving you.
Okay, cool.
So it really it depends, like on the type of way that they're leaning. All right, so what we're going to do in the next class is call screening. Okay, so we're continuing with producers, but call screeners in essence, because call screeners are extremely important. Even today, if you follow presenters and things and see how what they talk about, every now and then you'll see how they all are on the same thread talking about call screeners, etc. So very important class, and that will be tomorrow. So I'll see you again tomorrow for the second class for the week.